It is February, friends, which is that awkward time of year where it's still cold and it's still dark and it's still most definitely winter. Although mentally I am super ready for spring. But the one good thing that I do love about winter are just some hearty, warm, cozy meals. And that is what I'm going to be sharing with you today. 3 meals that your family will love that are, again, warming and comforting. Definitely comfort food. However, they're made with healthy, wholesome ingredients that are going to nourish your bodies as well.
Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to the cottage kitchen. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys a few healthy, warming, rich comfort meals for the winter time. So it's February and this is usually the time of year where I really start to feel winter and how cold and dark and just gray and brown everything is outside. And as much as I am ready for spring, it is definitely not spring yet. So something to do, during this time, February always just seems to be the hardest month, is really just to sink into it and embrace it. So all the coziness, all the fires, all, turning on the wood stove, all the cozy comfort meals, really celebrating and, pulling out the things that are perfect for this time of year and really filling February with them is something that I actually always look forward to. Food is just such a joy of life. It's obviously nourishing and life-giving, but it's so satisfying. And that is why, so much of what you'll see here on my channel is cooking, nourishing meals, because not only, as a dietitian, am I really passionate about nutrition, passionate about wholesome, good ingredients, feeding my family well and myself well, and this baby well. But also, I really want to enjoy food and I want food to be a celebration. I want it to be something that is truly enjoyed by myself and my family. And that's why you never see me go do any kind of dieting or cutting anything out. I believe that we can eat all things in balance. But one of the most important pillars of health and longevity and vitality is nutrition. And a lot of that comes about through cooking your own food and being able to control the ingredients. And this is so much about so much of what I talk about in my course. I really just want people to learn how to not only eat well and actually understand nutrition and be able to apply it without it becoming confusing or stressful, but also so that you can really enjoy food, because if you're not enjoying food, you are missing out on so much. So as I said, in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 3 winter cozy home cooked meal ideas that you guys can try out while it's still cold and still dark and we're all wishing for spring, but it is just not quite here yet.
The first meal I am sharing with you guys is chicken pot pie. I don't know what screams comfort meal more than chicken pot pie, but instead of doing the traditional crust, pie crust, I'm actually just making it with biscuits. I got this idea from Lisa from Farmhouse on Boone. I adore her channel and I actually use her sourdough biscuit recipe for this as well. So I'll link that down below for you guys. But the night before, just to get it fermenting, you basically just add your flour and your butter to a bowl, and you want to cut all the butter in so it's basically like little pea-sized chunks. This is what helps make the biscuits really flaky when they bake. And then you add in your sourdough starter, a little bit of honey, and some milk. Mix it all together, and then you leave that to ferment overnight, and then we'll bake the biscuits the next day with the pot pie. So the next day, it was time to actually make the pot pie and make the filling for it. So I started with just adding some butter to my pan and chopped up some onion, minced some garlic, and I got that going over the stove just to start cooking those down. And then I took a total shortcut here because I used frozen mixed veggies, which is a great way to cut down on time and chopping and makes things a little bit easier. And I just threw those in there frozen, and they did take, I don't know, probably 10 minutes or so to cook down. So while those were cooking, I actually made the biscuits. So I took that dough that had been fermenting overnight and I rolled it out. And I actually don't have a biscuit cutter. I just use a mason jar and it honestly works fine. The only thing is you want to resist the urge to twist it because that actually seals off the dough and it doesn't allow the biscuits to rise and get as fluffy and, as crumbly and flaky as you'd like. So that's my little tip for that. But you can totally get away with using a mason jar. That's what I always use. And once my veggies were starting to cook down, I added a little bit of flour. I'll add the recipe, the link to the recipe down below that I used. I didn't follow it exactly, but it's pretty much the gist. Anyway, so I add a little bit of flour, and this is what's going to help thicken up our filling. So it's nice and like silky and just delicious. We obviously don't want like broth going in here. It would just get soggy. So after I added the flour and I cooked it for a couple minutes, I went ahead and added in broth. This is just chicken bone broth that I make weekly. And then I also added in some salt and some pepper. Totally meant to add in some dried thyme and parsley, but I literally just completely forgot. But if you have those, definitely go ahead and toss those in there for flavor. And then once this started to like come to a boil, I let it go down to a simmer, and I just let it simmer there for a good 10 minutes or so because you really want it to thicken up. Once the filling had cooked down and thickened up, I went ahead and dumped it into a big, I guess this is like a 9x13 baking dish. And then we just take our little biscuits that we cut up and we place those on top. I just kind of nestled them in there so that they were all nice and tucked into the filling. And then you're just going to bake this at 400 for about like 10 to 15 minutes. Basically, the filling's already cooked. You're just looking for those biscuits to puff up and get golden brown and a little bit crispy on the edges. And it seriously is so delicious. And this really is a very simple meal to make. I find doing the biscuits is easier than like fussing around with a pie crust, which is, you know, you can obviously do that too, but I just love this version. It just feels like a quick and dirty version to me. And also myself and my family absolutely loves biscuits. So anytime we can get some sourdough biscuits into a meal, everyone is pretty happy. The next meal I'm going to make is tomato soup, which is another classic comfort meal, and it's actually super easy to make. To make it a little bit fancier, I make some homemade croutons, which might sound like a lot of work, but they're literally so easy, and it's a great way to use up bread that may be going stale. So the very first thing I do is just cut up some bread. I just used some sourdough that I had on hand that was getting a little bit older, and you just dice it up. You throw them all in a bowl, coat them with either avocado oil, or I love using olive oil, and then you're just going to add a little garlic powder, a little salt, a little pepper, and I like to do parsley and oregano. You could also use like an Italian seasoning blend, and you just mix it all up so they're all nice and coated. Throw them on a pan, on a baking sheet with some parchment paper, and then you're going to bake them in the oven at 375. My oven runs a little hot. It usually takes me like 12 to 15 minutes, but it could take up to 20. You basically just want to watch them, and once they get nice and toasty and golden brown and crunchy, that's when you want to pull them from the oven. It literally takes like 5 minutes of effort, and it is such a delicious topping that's going to make, you know, your just weeknight tomato soup feel so fancy and so delicious and just that much more comforting. For the actual tomato soup, I start by putting a couple tablespoons of butter into my Dutch oven pot, and then dice up some onion, and then you're going to go ahead and throw that in, and you want the onion to cook down until it's kind of translucent. Again, I will link a recipe down below that I found online that I really like. I don't follow it exactly, but I'll tell you what I do differently. Anyway, so while the onion is cooking, you're just going to mince up your garlic and add that in and let that cook for a couple minutes, and then you're going to go ahead and add in some flour, and just cook that around for like a minute or two more. And then this is when it actually kind of turns into a soup. So we're going to add in our broth. Again, I just use bone broth that I make, which is super cost effective. It's yummy and it's so nourishing, and it just really makes this soup very, very nutritious. A bunch of diced tomatoes, a little bit of sugar to cut the acidity of the tomatoes, and then I add in salt and pepper. Obviously, salt, you actually want to use like a decent amount of salt. I use about a tablespoon and a half, and that's usually good for me, but obviously just salt it to taste. And then I also like to dump in some dried basil as well. So you just stir that all together, and you just get it to where it's like simmering. and reduce it to low on your stovetop and just let it sit there for like 40 minutes or so. And then it's time to blend it up. So I have an immersion blender. I love an immersion blender. It makes making a soup like this a total cinch. If you don't have one, or you just don't want an extra small appliance laying around, you can also just put this into a blender. I would just do it in a couple batches and you can whip it up that way. So one thing that I do different than the recipe is at this point, I like to add in probably about like a fourth to a half cup, somewhere around there. I just kind of eyeball it, of grated Parmesan cheese. And then I do also like to add a little bit, probably about a fourth cup of heavy cream as well, and you just mix that all in. It makes it so silky, and I love just like the flavor that the Parmesan cheese brings. It's so good. But this is pretty much like a veggie based soup, so obviously, and of course we've got the bone broth in there, so it's very healthy, it's very nourishing. Top it off with those croutons. Oh my goodness, it is seriously so good. You could also just eat it with some nice crusty bread on the side, but I personally prefer the croutons. I find them to be so delicious and just the perfect addition. Lastly, we are going to be making a pot roast in the crock pot, which is definitely just a quintessential comfort meal that is perfect for this time of year. And I love and hate this recipe because I'm basically cooking dinner like right after we eat breakfast, which I don't love to do, but then dinner is basically done right after I cook breakfast. So that is also amazing, and I love it for that reason. So I start by just putting a little bit of avocado oil in my skillet, and I use a chuck roast for this, and you basically just want to brown it on each side. This is going to bring out a lot of the flavor. It's also going to help lock in the juices so that when we eat it later, it's nice and tender and juicy. So you definitely don't want to skip this step. And then also, once that is done, we're going to be using all the brown bits that are left over to make like a sauce. Again, I will link the recipe down below that I used for this. I made it several times and I really like it. So you're going to add some tomato paste to your skillet and just kind of stir it constantly just for like a minute or so. You want it to like see that it's like darkening a little bit and cooking a little bit. And then you're going to add in broth. Use whatever broth you have. Again, I always have chicken broth on hand, so that's what I used. And you're basically just going to stir that together until it cooks down a little bit, and just to kind of get all those brown bits off of the skillet. And then you're just going to take that tomatoey broth mixture, you're going to pour it all over the chuck roast that's now in your crock pot. And then you're just going to add a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. I added some rosemary, and you can add garlic, you can add thyme. And that is what we're going to actually put into our crock pot as far as the roast goes. But then we do want to add some veggies as well. So in a bowl, I added some like sliced up onions, like big chunks of onions, some diced up potatoes, some carrots, and then you're just going to add a little bit of either olive oil or avocado oil, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and you're just going to mix that all together, and then you're basically just going to dump it on top of that chuck roast. And congratulations, dinner is basically done now. So go ahead and put the lid on your crock pot. You're going to cook it for, you want to cook it on low because you want that thing to be tender. I've done it on high before, and I'm always sorry. Like, you just have to start it early in the day because you want it to be tender. You want it to be like falling apart, melt in your mouth if you're going to do it. So cook it for 8 to 10 hours until it's done. 8 hours is usually fine for me. And then once it's all done, you just shred it up. You eat it with those veggies. It is so delicious. It melts in your mouth, but it's also high protein. It's got vegetables, and my kids will eat it with a little bit of ketchup and they're happy as clams. And it's just so good, especially for this time of year.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you are new to my channel, I would absolutely love for you to subscribe, hit the bell notification so you never miss any of my upcoming videos. And of course, if you enjoy my channel or a video in particular, I would absolutely love for you to share it with someone you think would enjoy it as well. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. As always, leave a comment down below. Let me know what kind of videos you would like to see next. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.